If she gets too distracting, we have someone that can help her.
Oh, that means you love to join us. Couch ready.
Yep. Okay.
Up front.
How's everyone doing? How many of you saw it for the first time? Wow, incredible. Are you doing okay?
I know. I didn't ask that question because I wanted to ask it when you were here, and I tried not to give too much of it. I gave a very general introduction to not sway anybody, so again, you all survived. That's okay. And I wanted to honestly just start this Q&A with like a huge thank you. Like, we are a video store, historic video store, and just like firmly, obviously love cinema, and seeing you on screen and continuing to make work has been like such a gift. And so I just so appreciate you being back on screen with everybody. So that's my first. It's a joy and my grace to see you up there. And so I like to take us back to the beginning. So, how were you introduced to the script? Like, how did it come your way? When did you first get introduced to the movie?
It was interesting because it was at a point where I was feeling a little bit disheartened, not quite sure if maybe the universe was telling me I needed to shift and move in a new direction. And my team, it just showed up on, my desk, although my agent sent it saying, hey, I've got something that's interesting, and I actually, I don't say anything. I just say something. And so, obviously, once I read it, I understood, because I don't know if there was any way you could actually convey kind of what, because the script was very detailed, very specific, and I think the scope of it was so absolutely bonkers. But I was absolutely captivated. But I mean, it was, in truth, I realized, there was a lot about it. That obviously, the subject matter, the unique way it was being told. But in truth, when it got to the part of the back opening up and another entity was going to come out, I was like, I'm in. I don't know why, the shared consciousness, I was like that. It was just like so beyond anything I had ever imagined.
Yeah.
And as the film is, it's not really like anything we've ever seen.
Right. And then, so when did you meet Coralie? Like, you get the script and you're clearly enthralled by the story, and then how did you introduce the director?
We had, because she was in France, I'm obviously here, and so our initial meetings were over Zoom.
Yeah.
And then it just so happened that I had work that was going to be in Paris, so we then finally sat down and met in person. And then we had another in-person meeting like a month later, but I think all in we met 6 times.
Wow.
And this is a very, very personal story for her.
Right.
And she had lived with it for a very long time before she even got to the point of being able to start to meet with actors. And I think letting it go, really like committing to someone, I think was very important, that she felt that they really understood what she was, trying to do, and not just what the story was, but the way in which she wanted to tell it. I think she felt very protective of that. And at a certain point in terms of the actual depth of subject matter, I have written a memoir, and I felt like there was no better way to really allow her to move into a sense of trust with me, but by reading it and see it in black and white, because so much of my early years, I went through so much personal torture that I put myself through over my body and it not being a certain way. And I think once I gave her that, then she offered me the role.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
That to me, that director to actor trust, it sounds like that you had to build, just seems like such a necessary foundation again for this role, because also given you don't have a lot of dialogue. And I'm just so curious that when you see this and you're reading from the page, your approach to Elizabeth, like where did you kind of start with that? And go, okay, this is the journey I'm going to take, and what you're going to tap into for that.
Well, it's really interesting. Obviously, she's a very visual and symbolic storyteller. And because the script was so detailed, I think the first script I wrote was 175 pages.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, it was in depth, novel. But I think part of that was she really wanted to make sure everybody knew just visually what she was going to be doing. And so my approach with the character, I realized that I really had to put my time, my pre-production, my personal time, really going over the script in as much detail, probably as she put into the visual, so that I could anchor Elizabeth into somebody that had a full existence. Because if you look, she has no friends, no family.
Right.
There's really nothing that is there to lean on to create somebody that I knew. I felt like a big part of what I needed to bring was a real person, because it needed to be anchored in something real for us to go to those other more extreme places.
Absolutely.
And so part of that is also because I didn't have the luxury of playing off another actor, like having somebody to feed you, or even for the audience to be informed as to who you are.
Right.
Which so often that is how we get to know other characters, is through the eyes of the other characters in the story. And so I realized I needed to go through so that in those moments when I only was with myself, that I was in dialogue with myself. So in those moments in the mirror, as I'm, in whether it was contemplative or just that it was alive at all times. It was definitely a very unique experience, and I did have an awareness, like, I don't want to be repetitive or seem flat, when you're just gazing at yourself, which is awkward unto itself. Like that, just the nature of that also lent it. But a big part of doing that prep work was so that on the day, whatever the scene was, I could show up, let all of that go, and have that just be in me, so that I could be present to whatever the scene was and what was happening.
I mean, and I would just say that's, just hearing you talk about this and the thoroughness and kind of the responsibility you took on with this character, that's what really resonates. And I'm so thankful that you did that, because again, that is what I can tell by audiences are really connecting with this. It's exactly what you said. You're often acting alone or just with yourself in the mirror. It's, again, a remarkable performance.
As what we're given to work with, and so I'm really grateful, because for me, my intention has always been really to seek out to do meaningful, memorable work, and that's why this also was so special, is that I just didn't feel like something like this, giving me this opportunity, had come along.
Right. Well, so then that takes me, there's, Sue, we have Margaret also in the film with you. And it's so wonderful to watch how, again, you play off each other, and the whole theme, obviously, you are one. And then when you two get to act together is in one of, I think, the greatest fight scenes. I'm sorry, I've seen the film many times now, and when I first saw it the first time, I was horrified. And then I now got to the point where I laugh at it, like, you get into it. And so sorry, first timers, I'm sure that might have been very hard.
It's been traumatizing, banging my head against the mirror. You dead yet?
When you know what's coming, it's funny. But so I just wanted to talk then about that partnership, because that's what it feels like in so many ways. You're, one, but you're also very different.
Yes.
When you're given little dialogue to work with, can you talk about working with Margaret?
Well, first of all, I absolutely love, adore, respect, admire her. And one of the things that gave me confidence in doing this, because it was obviously very risky, pushed us out of our comfort zone, was knowing that Coralie was talking, about Margaret to play Sue, told me that she was going to be looking to make it performance first, as opposed to it just being somebody that looked the most like me.
Right.
the amazing thing, you know, one of my very first films I worked with Margaret's mom, which is Annie McDowell, and St. Elmo's Fire. And then Margaret knew my daughter. So in a way, the very first time we met in person, we had a certain familiarity or connection, and it doesn't always happen where you meet someone and actually it requires very little in-depth conversation because just our kind of connection was already almost an innate one, where our approach was very similar, kind of our commitment of really going all in. And I think there was also an immediate awareness of the level of raw vulnerability that was going to be asked of us, emotionally, physically, where we really looked out for each other. You know, Coralie was very focused on, you know, the visual and the technical, and we had each other. I mean, there were days because of, you know, we were there for 5.5 months for the whole shoot, and to, you know, be able to have as much time for, you know, shooting, we were both there the whole time, as opposed to you might have normally seen like go do my part, then our part together, and then Margaret's. No, we were there every day. It felt a little bit like tapping in, tap out. But when we got to that final scene, I was so excited because it's the only time we're both conscious. Right. I mean, really, like it was like, oh my gosh, we're actually both awake in this moment. And I will say, and I just saw Margaret, you know, we were sitting with each other at the Critics' Choice Award, and she just said, we have to find something else to do together. Because, you know, because obviously we could be more conscious. Perhaps we could have dialogue together.
Or you might have started a trend, we don't know. That's so lovely to hear again. And again, it's so obvious, and because that scene, like I said, I'll just go back to it, like the one time that you're together and conscious and experiencing it, it's electric.
Yeah, I think you know, that idea of also the battle within oneself was so clear. There was so much of that. It's amazing just how much ease we had with each other to it just dropped in for us.
I'm going to go a little bit broad with a question here. I'm curious. I don't know what came to mind, but just kind of been thinking about, obviously, the metaphors and the themes that this film is exploring are obviously very, you know, focused, I think, on the female experience and particular, I would think, to kind of the standards for women. But in watching it, as I said now multiple times, one that particular of many themes that sticks out to me is like the pain that we're willing to put ourselves through. This is actually for everybody, not just women, but very specific to meeting certain standards, like physical pain, and then how the horror genre, like what a perfect genre to explore that. And so the broad question is actually more like your experience of working within the horror genre and your thoughts and feelings, I think, around this, especially as it is, I think, probably the year's most popular horror film.
I think, you know, what's interesting is, I think when it's grounded in something that's authentic, where there's an honesty within the characters, I think it doesn't matter what the genre is. I think you're willing to go. I think the idea of this being, you know, set in body horror, which I can tell you I had not a clue what that was.
Did you do some research?
I mean, Coralie kind of filled me in, and I was like, oh, okay, that one, yeah, okay. Fly. I understand the opportunity that this gave in really taking it to that level of violence. Because to me, what really rooted me, why I wanted to do this, is really that exploration of the violence that we can have against ourselves. Obviously, the circumstance is heightened by the character being an actress, being somebody who's in the public eye, which comes with a lot of added scrutiny and criticism. And I think it allowed that just to drop in. We get what that might be. But the truth is, we've all walked through that harsh self-judgment. And so that idea from the horror perspective was, what would it look like if we could create a physical manifestation of the harshness of the words and thoughts that we have against ourselves? What would that look like? And for me, that was always a part of the evolution or the transformation that occurs for Elizabeth. Is that when that body is fully degraded, that is ultimately the outside reflecting what she's been carrying inside.
And then does that, so then I'm then curious actually then about the practical effects, right? Because were you kind of presented them and orally showed them to you? Were you a part of that process in any way? And kind of, to me that very much piggybacks off of your answer, right? Is where maybe did that manifestation actually, did it meet your expectations perhaps?
I mean, she always referred to my most degraded state, just it was the shorthand with the special effects team as well, was like the Gollum. And so, I was able, when we arrived for the pre-production, we were still finishing, we already done the molds and certain things. There were already drawings, essentially. This was not a very big budget film, so it's not like we had, the money to be able to do extensive trials of the different prosthetics. And so a lot of it, in terms of the final, was just it was getting there on the day, doing as much as they could, ahead of time, but until we really were like on the day, I didn't know. Like even finding the body and the movement, like how was I going to move? And then the other aspect of that is, the rules weren't entirely following logic.
Right.
Like I, was completely degraded, could barely move, but I could haul ass down the hallway. And so I was like, okay. And so trying to wrap your head around, like, okay, because it is all okay. That's the great thing in this genre, is that we have the permission to go wherever we want, to create that visceral response. And, even though I didn't know, because this really required a very delicate line to walk, so that the end going so big didn't dilute the importance of the message that was being laid at the beginning.
Right.
So, I think she did a masterful job. And one of the other things I think was, I really understood was how sound was going to be used. And, the extreme close-ups. And in a way, I was able to kind of keep that in my mind as I was, in my performance, because that was sometimes often my other actor. Right? The heightened sound, heightened close-ups that I didn't have in the actual scene.
Well, then going back to also Carolee, I was just thinking a lot about how every male character in this film is vile. And even I'm sorry, but like
Fred's not.
Okay, but this is what I thought.
I
think that you were gonna say this, but I actually thought about this. Like Fred isn't vile, sorry, but he also is extractive. And I think that's what's very interesting, right? That he approaches you, his character approaches you in a way to get something from you, right? He's not like asking you how your day is and let me help you. It's, I'm attracted to you, I want something. And even the male voice, or excuse me, like the masculine voice, I don't know if it's male, but it's masculine, that is of the substance is this, this sinister masculine energy. And then that made me think about the kind of the importance of the female gaze, and then working with a female director specifically within this role. Could you just talk about that, for lack of a better term, energy, working with Coralie?
Well, I think that she clearly had some anger towards men. But I would also say I think that she had some anger towards women. I think this is very aggressive towards women at the same time. I think I have a very different perception or approach for me. One, I would say a couple things. I don't think the film is meant to be anti-men, it's anti-jerks. And for me, it was very important. Look, there is in the film a clear, male perspective of the idealized woman. But it's the idealized woman that we as women have bought into. And that for me was a very important distinction, because when we change how we are holding ourselves, I believe then the world changes on the outside. So it was important for me not to hold this or my character as a victim to circumstance, which is why what resonated for me was that ultimately nothing is worse, not the circumstances, not anything that Dennis Quaid's character says to her, than what she's doing to herself. And that is an important distinction, because that's what we have actually power over. What other people do or don't do is irrelevant. How we hold it is everything. So I don't know. Does that answer your question at all?
And wherever we go with that, I'm actually fine. Because I just to not make light of your answer or you saying that's what's so incredible about this movie. It is so layered. And it is layered where it might feel perhaps not nuanced, and it is. For something that might be very direct, or it's trying to be maybe very blunt with metaphor, and then you actually look closer, you're like, oh no, there's a lot underneath here that you can see reflected back in yourself. And
I find it also very interesting. One of the subtle more subtle aspects is, Elizabeth gets this second chance in this new, younger body with a better ass. And she repeats the same pattern. She seeks the same validation, as opposed to waking up and saying, hey, you know what, maybe I'll just do my own show. That's a possibility, but how true that is in life, that we continue to repeat the same pattern until we wake up to get the lesson that it's trying to give us.
Well, and this makes me, I don't know if I have this fully formed, so hear me out.
Give it.
But speaking about our younger selves, and again, the layers of this, and I think wanting to address you having a career as an actress, and a remarkable career, by the way, and you being perfectly cast for this, and how your younger self is immortalized and marked forever for us to see again and again, and it's captured on screen. So I'm really curious, what is it like for you to revisit your work, seeing yourself younger?
I'm finding a little bit more gentility and appreciation. I generally don't like watching myself. But what I find is I too, with this chronological time on Earth, have had, and with a little bit more distance, can look back with just a little bit more kindness, a little bit more appreciation for who I was and what I was doing. I had a very interesting thing happen just 2 or 3 weeks ago. I realized that my youngest daughter and her fiance had never seen Ghost. And so they, were trying to force my hand to come and watch it, which I said absolutely not. And then they took a little break halfway and they said, please just come watch the second half. And I literally realized I had not seen it in over 30-something years.
Wow.
And I was watching, and it just floods you back to who you are, where you were at, and how little appreciation I had, and also how much fear I had about how I delivered the performance I gave, and I looked at it and I thought, we did all right, kid.
Well, I'll leave you with this then, this last question, which is then perhaps around what it was like for you to watch The Substance for the first time.
Well, I saw it before Cannes, which is the first time we actually saw it completed. Margaret and her husband Jack and I were in a tiny little theater seeing it together. And always when you watch something for the very first time, it's a bit cringeable. Like there's a little like, I hate hearing my voice, I hate, you see expressions, or I talk with my hands so much. Like it's, there's just things. And so you almost have to just kind of settle into it. And I have to say, we were watching it, and the whole beginning, the opening with the eggs, and we're like, wow, I think this is going to be something. And then we got to the end, and again, it wasn't completed. We were like, I'm not so sure about it. I mean, it was 30 gallons of blood that she herself used with a fire hose. Literally. She operated. And I was off that week. And so I think the gift of taking time to work on yourself, to go inward, to let go of the judgments, the misunderstandings, the misidentifications, the misperceptions that you can hold against yourself. The gift of that is that you can actually see with a more expanded sense of appreciation, acceptance, and ultimately love of self. Not in an egocentric way, but just in a way that is of joy. And I think that I saw that. I saw what I had put into it. Trust me, I was still dissecting, saying, oh my God, my ass was awful in that shot. I'm telling you, oh my God. And then having to take a breath and go, it's okay. I'm 60 years old. It's okay. It's okay. In the movie, Elizabeth is aging out because she's hit 50. And the irony is, I was 60 when I made the movie. And so I marked that, not about, oh, how great am I, but because in reality, if they had gotten somebody 50, they would have been too young, which tells me that we are making progress.
Said in a probably discussion earlier, about this role and you specifically in this film. This film has resonated with audiences since its premiere at Cannes, and it's, younger audiences are gravitating and going towards it, older audiences as well. It's, I think, pigeonholing it, or that's not what I was trying to say when we're limiting it to just a horror genre. It's actually people are coming to the film that maybe didn't like it because they think of not only you being in this movie, but its message and what it's saying. And it's saying it in a very visceral and intense way, and therefore it's very fun to go back to the movie. So I just want to thank you so much.
You're so welcome, and I just want to leave, for me, one of the most beautiful messages that has come out of this is this idea of stopping wasting time focusing on all that you're not when you could be celebrating all that you are.